Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. Well over 2 weeks since the violent clashes between fascist government officials in the Islamic State of Iran against its citizens began. And according to multiple reports, none of which you can prove the provenance of because they shut down the internet and reporting is inconsistent. But reports as many as 3, 6, 12, 20, 30,000 Iranians slaughtered by the regime. But the silence is deafening. The African National Congress-led Government of National Unity in South Africa felt the need, before it was a GNU, to take Israel to the International Court of Justice over genocide, over a campaign of self-defense that doesn't even rise to the level of genocide. If it were genocide, the people of Gaza would be wiped out. They're not. They continue to exist. And if they're trying to wipe out Palestinians, the genocide would force the Israelis to attack countries around the world. Palestinians, there are more of them in Jordan than there are in Gaza. Yet Israel never attacked Jordan. Clearly not a case of genocide. But when it comes to Iran, best buds with the ANC, the same people who Naledi Pandor frequently visited, they have nothing to say. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The South African government invited the Iranian state sponsor of terror and the same regime that's murdering innocent civilians by shooting defenseless, unarmed civilians in the streets of its cities all over the country, invited them to a naval exercise comically called Will for Peace. Will for Peace. This would be with Russia, who invaded Ukraine, where we've had 1 million casualties, who invaded Georgia and was involved in Nagorno-Karabakh and Abkhazia, and who undermined the banking system of Estonia. The list of its intrigues and foreign exploits in neighboring states is endless, the bully to its neighboring states. This is the friend of the ANC. They invited China, who've imprisoned Uyghur Muslims for being Muslims, who've harvested their body parts, their organs. And they invited Iran, a state sponsor of terror who funds the Houthi, Hamas, and Hezbollah that have murdered countless tens of thousands of innocent civilians, Arab, Christian, Muslim, and Jew. These are the friends. This is the ANC's friends. Over 2 weeks later, and while we're at it, that Government of National Unity, the Democratic Alliance is finally, after the death of thousands in Iran, beginning to find its voice. And where is the golden boy, the golden child, the so-called rising star who is dumber than a box of rocks? Ronald Mullah, busy during these 2 weeks running around fabricating disputes with the United States, lying to the people of South Africa, and misleading the world, but silent on what is happening in Iran. Not a word, not a peep, not a press release, not a press conference, not a statement, not an op-ed, nothing. The man who comically sits on a CNN disinformation, misinformation documentary called Misinfonation, White Genocide, and calls Donald Trump a white supremacist. Then lies about the refugee program, fraudulently claiming that the program is only open to Afrikaners, a total load of poppycock, balderdash. Ronald Mullah, silent. The ANC, silent. At this stage, complicit. Complicit in the deaths of people in Iran. Why? Because they've said nothing about it. They've made no attempt to stop it. These are their friends. These are people they should be able to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. But they say nothing. The ANC does nothing because the ANC doesn't care about human rights. They hold themselves up as a paragon of morality and a guidestone for the world for what's just and right. But it's not about that. It's about their bizarre ideology, their Soviet-era lunatic obsession with socialism and its destructive policies, which they've imposed on South Africans. And they ignore the world while standing around foolishly pretending that they're neutral. The ANC is not neutral. The ANC likes totalitarians. Why? Because they aspire to achieve the same level of dominance over their populace. That's their goal. But the ANC is rapidly becoming irrelevant. At their recent 114th birthday celebration, in contrast to the one 2 years ago, they couldn't draw flies. And instead had embarrassing displays of people rolling around in the grass like a bunch of morons, pretending it's some sort of military drill with no hardware, no equipment. There are no tanks, there are no APCs, no helicopters flying around, just pretend soldiers rolling around the grass. Meanwhile, they also tied a team of black men to oxen yokes and used sunbucks to whip to get them to move around. What was that? Imagine if a white person did that. The country would have gone up in flames. But black people can treat black people like slaves, and it doesn't matter. The ANC has made itself irrelevant, and the voters of South Africa will follow suit at some point. It was once a vaunted movement to end racial oppression and inequality has morphed into what most liberation era parties do. It's our turn to eat, and we will oppress anyone we want to get our hands on the tenders. Yes, and even KFC chicken tenders. Unbelievable, folks. A disgusting, vile display of silence by the ANC, which, by their silence, makes them complicit and arguably means the ANC endorses the slaughter of civilians in Iran. What other conclusion can one reach? Quiet diplomacy? Nobody from South Africa is in Tehran at the moment. Nobody's talking to them. No one's pressuring them. And why can't they? Because the ANC has no power. Cyril Ramaphosa pretends he's a great statesman. He's just a little boy on the world stage. Nobody takes him seriously outside South Africa. They may use him occasionally as a convenient foil, particularly if they've got a beef with the United States, but nobody takes him seriously. South Africa is a client state. It is a colonial outpost of the Chinese communist regime, and in some ways, of the theocratical fascist regime in Tehran. What say you, South Africa? Zanzi? Cheers.